Today I'm with Dr. Sarah Crinall, and I'm really excited to talk to Sarah today. But first, Sarah, I'd love for you to say something about who you are and about the work that you do.
Thanks, Linda. It's so lovely to be here. I'm honoured to be asked. Yeah, I'm Dr. Sarah Crinall and I live on Malau. So I'd like to acknowledge country. I'm on Boonwurrung Country. This is where the Yallock Bulluck have a unique relationship with water and land going back 65,000 and more years. So I live with that every day in my relationship with Malau, which is Phillip Island on the Southern Ocean, through my blogging methodologies and way of being in the world. I'm Anglo-Indian Australian, white appearing, so first generation Australian. I'm a mother. I have two children, 7 and 10, who just recently gone to school, and we have lived a life outside of school until now. I love to artistically collaborate as a writer and an artist. So I move between the two, working with words and working with materials in ways that don't involve words at all, and then working with words in non-wordy ways. I think at the moment I'm describing myself as an everyday playful academic. I did my PhD and graduated in 2017, and I did it part-time as a mother and primary carer, living here on Phillip Island, Malau, in a active community life, starting playgroups and various kinds of schools along the way. So a playful academic with a part-time Australian Postgraduate Award scholarship, which I advocated for women and mothers to be able to participate in the academy with mothering sitting next to doctoral work. And now I'm an adjunct research fellow with Western Sydney University, and I still live a part-time academic work or an everyday academic life where I live everyday life outside of academia next to my academic contributions.
Thanks, Sarah. It just really captures a contemporary way of being kind of an intellectual and a practitioner and a mother, and not that I like to separate those roles out, you know, they are woven. It's a familiar story to me too. But it's lovely to hear all of those kind of ways in which you are in the world. So thank you for that. So my first question to you is, love for you to share some of your work that links to the themes of the Mapping Future Imaginaries. And I know you have a wonderful project that you're going to share with us about futures and thinking in new ways about futures.
I've very much enjoyed diving through the Mapping Future Imaginaries videos, and I've watched other scholars talk about their work and their lives as entanglements. And the project I'd like to speak to that I feel is Mapping a Future Imaginary, and plural, is an abstract I've just written for a publication that's a special issue about doing academia differently in the Global South specifically. And so the title of the paper that's been accepted and I'm working on, which is very exciting for me because it's a solo publication. And as an early career academic, I have loved collaborations and grown with them. And so writing on my own has been surprisingly life-giving. And looking back to my PhD work and bringing it into a postdoctoral space. So I'd like to read to you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Academia's breath. Oxygenating academia by blogging with artworks. Australia is one colonised country in the global south, trying to live differently with our morbid symptoms. The Global Academy's neoliberal coating may hopefully be perforated, even if slightly, with intentional shifts that allow oxygen into scholarship with some different scholarly processes. This was my experience doing a doctorate. I've had a very positive and life-sustaining experience as a doctoral student. Everything about it was nourishing, really. I felt no tension or stress. And I take that concept of sustenance into my work now as an early career researcher. Outside the supervision space, while collaborating with student education researchers and other academics thoughtfully, I am looking for porous openings to do things with care so they and I too can breathe. So that's a short excerpt. When I was completing my PhD, I used a note-taking method. It began as journaling, but it's not journaling, it's writing with awareness of body and place in movement. That concepts are developed in a moving kind of a way. So working with Denise Newfield in South Africa, I have realized that what my writing method allows is staying in the space of uncertainty. And while I'm writing a body place blog post, I am staying with not knowing. Questions are continuously raised, and concepts that were rigid and traditionally embedded become undone. So no aspect of my work, it was Anna Vladmirova, a colleague in Finland, said, so many concepts. My writing method as an artistic practice and a way of mapping the future of academia differently might be a concept generator that ensures we don't sit in rigid certainty and we continue to question.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Sarah. And I'm thinking of transversality as well as you were speaking, you know, in the way that historically we've privileged the mind and the mind's capacity, and the body has become just a kind of secondary material object. You know, when we talk about academics, it's all about the brain. But actually, I think more and more people are understanding that it is more of a whole system, and that's just the person. But then there's the person with, as you say, within place, history, culture, scholarship itself, you know, and that it really picks up to me on that transversality and expanding out of those very kind of historical ways of thinking about being an academic. So super interesting, and the fact that you are purposefully writing creatively and experimentally about that, but with it, and using writing as a kind of practice, a creative and experimental practice. That's super interesting.
Very much a transverse practice.
Yeah,
I really love those two words for it.
Yeah,
it doesn't locate. I don't like to, or I find it's not locatable in any particular discipline.
Yeah.
It invites all aspects of academic life and everyday life are welcome, because we start with the body, and I access that through Elizabeth Gross and Margaret Somerville's work. And when I started with the body, I was able to. It was validated that I could follow my intuition into any interest area, and it can be folded into my academic theorizing, with that beginning with the body. That also loops outwards to place and the material world. But then theory comes to me as I'm reading, and whatever I'm choosing to engage with. And there is the transverse nature of it. I can pick up a book. I'm reading this at the moment with Native Speak, just passed. That was one of my purchases. And I can pick it up and look at one poem and read it. And so much comes for me out of that, in relation to body and place and my ethical commitments to Malau and the Boonwurrung people who live here now and before.
Yeah.
So it's a practice that never finishes. I'm not articulating a change that will be somewhere we arrive. I'm committed to practicing this each day. It's a way of being.
Yeah, fantastic. Just really, and I love the fact that is kind of rethinking, reimagining what scholarship and where scholarship is, in terms of locating scholarly practice, that who gets to do that and where, and you know, those kind of boundary lines are being kind of permeated and kind of questioned, which is really wonderful. So that's really exciting, and I look forward to reading that paper when it comes out. That's
thank you.
Sounds really wonderful. So now for the second part of our conversation, I'd love for you to share more broadly about something, a project or some ongoing work that you'd like to talk about with us.
Okay. I'd love to. I'm linking it with what you just said. So as a part-time scholar, I have casual academic positions, and that is the reality for a lot of us when we finish doctoral work, especially those of us home with primary caring roles with our children, and then those of us who live regionally in areas without universities. As a place-based scholar who's ethically committed to the place that I live and the work I want to do here and for it, who is in practice with the place, so being here is quite important in the longer term or middle term, I'm now very playfully exploring what it is to be an academic in that position, and in some ways clawing on, but more often and hopefully sailing along the waterway, you know, flowing through and experiencing this. So my partner and I decided, when we decided to stay located here and see how my academic life could continue to proliferate, we said, let's just keep going. And so here we are. You're often not seen and practicing quietly at home on a dirt road with dirt drains and underneath massive cypress and she oak trees in a little rundown beach shack. Sometimes I look at it and think, can anyone really see me? but I am here, and I'm very committed to writing with this place. And I'm listening to academics who are in cities and in other locations, or perhaps moving, doing the important work in institutions with their bodies. And I want to work with all of you in partnership in a complementary way. So lovely to be here with this conversation. And the beginning of that happened when I did my PhD with Margaret Somerville and Karen Malone. And I worked with Margaret's book, Body Landscape Journals. And I started to write with my body and extend outward in my journaling practice to place. And I did that on a blog because that's the technological era that I exist in, and I have an iPhone. And I would just, with my blog, I got the blogging method from my friend Nicola Peters. She's also a waterway educator, as I am, and a marine ecologist, as I am. And she was overseas, and her and I committed a long time ago to move and have experiences and adventures. And she would write blogs for hers. Well, my adventure became staying put on place, having children in the end, a conscious decision that was a shift in my thinking at a particular time. And so I decided, in response to her adventurous childless blogs, to write Living Little on Malau, Phillip Island. And my blogging method, which was just a journaling practice, really caught my heart and my supervisor's attention. So today I thought I'd share with you something of the body place blogging onto methodology. It became my work, because when I was doing it, I was not doing what I think I should.
Yeah.
And my research question was, how do art and waterways have an alternative knowledge that emerges between them in the art making process? And I interviewed artists who made artworks with water on the coast and in freshwater systems. And I'm a marine ecologist who's a waterway educator. So with a very scientific mindset, when I began my PhD, I was really looking to see what alternative knowledge would come out of the art making process. And I wrote the transcripts of the interviews with artists down, and I was looking for quite tangible data. And that still exists, and those are in the book, the monograph that I've put together. But what I became most interested in were the outliers, the mess, the disruptions, and this feeling that I had when I wrote the blog posts with body and place, and the theory that caught my attention and came to me in those moments of awareness with body and place. I put them into the blog, I threw photos in. I wanted them to feel the way I felt when I was breathing the fresh air out in these places with artists.
Yeah.
And that became what I focused on as a mode of sustenance in academia. So I'm not saying that I am representing sustenance in academia with this work, with all of the mess and the other parts that come with it.
Okay.
Along with my commitment to foregrounding with Indigenous knowledges and the people on Malau, the Yallock Bulluck people, I also foreground the perspectives of children, and through body and place that came to me. So the particular piece I'd like to read to you is based on an artwork that was produced with an artist, Prue Clements from Cooirra on Yallock Creek. And my daughter, Edith, was also painting with us that day. And I want to read to you about the disruption. I guess I'm reading to you a disruption that comes. All the time there are disruptions, and the blogging process is a disruption to linear causation and rational knowing. We're not opening a white document to write in a particular way with a format anymore in the body place blogging process. Instead, we're doing it differently. So this is a body place blog post.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Looks great.
And this is the monograph that I wrote with my PhD.
And I'll just say that if people are interested, there'll be a link below the video to look at the book more fully.
Thanks. So Edith's painting an echidna there, the part I just showed you. This is the painting.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And some of the pictures of, that's my other daughter Vivi actually eating paint and sucking it off her paintbrush.
Fantastic.
That's her painting.
Gorgeous.
Prue, Edith and I painted on the Lawson Street swales earlier this year. Edith used her own paper taped on her painting board, an old chopping board, and took paint from a miniature wooden painting box that holds her favourite coloured paints. Prue said to Edie, Prue on her painting stool, Edith squatting by a dry swale, and I with Vivi in the swale. I looked up when I heard Prue notice Edith painting over her echidna in white. Oh, now you've gone too far. Okay. This body place blog post is from February 2nd, 2016, and it's called Doom and Gloom. So I would just get my phone out. There's a moment where I feel drawn towards what's happening, and I would just type out these words and take a few photographs and throw them into the words and then press publish. Sitting in the coaching, waving womb room while Vivi sleeps, I tap out these trailing words left dangling from Prue's visit, but Price's visit. I keep all typos there. Colour. Prue thinks Edith has gone too far. Her echidna, Edith placed, a bodily form in white on a dark background, has now clouded over. Grey circles on grey and pulled paper where Edie has rubbed hard. Edith is not attached to what was before, nor what comes next. She was with each layer as it land now. The punting is stuck in a corner, still stuck to her board. She does not care for soon or gloom either. I settle my mid-panic at this section. Trying to build and protect the swale paperback stands feels frantic against Edie's cloudy echidna. Scratch my head, smile. Like the cartoons, I am thinking this over. Slippers call.
Fantastic. Love it. And I love the extra things that the original typos bring as well. It's fantastic.
So usually with those, Linda, I will then consider that poetic text. I am calling them poems now and poetry. And I'm encouraging students that I mentor at the University of Melbourne to create descriptive poems that are, for those intimidated, lists of words that come to them when they're thinking something through. The way that we read it and sit with those words and privilege them makes them poetry for me. The other part of my way of writing is prose. And I write in a very ordinary, everyday, plain speak kind of a way, best I can. And I speak back to those blog posts. And I take those typos and I use them to create new concepts. So if there's a little bit more time, I would show you, for example, in that particular instance, excuse me for flicking.
That's okay.
I'll just read, I'm just picking a random one now. So let's see how it works out. But I will pick up a book, or in my mind, some theory will come to me that I've been working with. And they are all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander allied theorists that I'm working with. And more I'm looking directly to Aboriginal Indigenous scholars to think with. In this case, it's Elizabeth Gross and Deleuze. Gross argues that so much of nature is art, an art sensation and nothing else. According to Deleuze, art is excess. Now I feel justified in throwing stuff into a film based on love. I slip into another thought. In Logic of Sensation, Deleuze proposes that art, which is its own form of becoming, not creator, nor viewer, attends provocations and problems, moving through catastrophe into rhythm. That piece of writing is with the theorist, but it speaks also in collaboration with the blog posts. So they become a non-human, more than human entity that I'm in conversation with, and I privilege them as I do an allied scholar.
That's really interesting. And what I find interesting is what surfaces, the kind of ways in which we remember those very intense texts, and the kind of rich ideas and the complex ideas and concepts and things. That's really interesting how that works in your writing as well. Perhaps they are the intense moments for you.
Yes.
And the things that are retained and reside with you as you're going through this process. It's really, it's really interesting.
I like hearing you say what, I can't remember your word, but I saw you lean forward. And for me, I just constantly working with that pull and being allowed to listen to it, I think has been a key part of the sustaining nature of this work for me. And the contacting my previous child and that gift I can give to listening to, responding to children, people who are not in privileged and power positions at particular times or always. When I'm working with Denise Newfield at the moment, we're writing for an encyclopedia of qualitative methods about multimodalities. We're writing about multimodality. And for Denise, she's a multimodality scholar. She has a qualitative background and a lot of theory to explain how multimodality has been used in education to now over her long and illustrious career. For me, I'm at the beginning of my career, and what she sees in me is that I'm doing post-qualitative research in the way I'm interacting and bringing those aspects of everyday life, material and immaterial, together. It becomes a multimodal way of being academic. And writing together has been fascinating and revealing to understand that in hindsight, looking back. It's as though my academic career is data itself also, always.
Absolutely. And that's it goes back to what the journal paper that you were talking about before. It's actually how it emerges differently for us in new ways. Shouldn't say new, because these are old ways too, but they've been kind of certain ways have been privileged historically in terms of how academia is performed, how it's done, how it's accepted, and it's kind of been separate to many other existing long used ways of being kind of attuned to the world and thinking carefully and thinking theoretically, and but perhaps not within the academy. So to me, what you've just said really links to this this kind of emergence that academia is going through, which is, the recent world events have made us think about how and where we work and how and where we think intellectually, and who gets included and who gets excluded, and that there's this whole raft of kind of academic process that's going on that is not within the university space. And so the two projects that you've shared are really interesting examples of that, I think. So it's just been great to hear about them. I don't know if you have any closing things you'd like to say, or
I'd like to, I'll just respond to what I just heard when you were speaking, that excited me too, and that is the transformation of academia and the returning to old voices who have been silenced and not heard. And really very much enjoying working now with two university projects that are privileging and foregrounding children's perspectives, co-mentoring and co-educating, and privileging and foregrounding Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander knowledges here in Australia, and returning or opening up our ears to voices that have long been trying to be heard. And that resonates for me, that post-qualitative research in education is delightfully going backward and messing with linearity. And I'm looking at the pictures behind you with the tangled lines and feeling very excited about that non-linear progress that we're part of. Thanks for having me, Linda.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure, Sarah, and looking forward to seeing that paper come out. And again, if people watching, there'll be links underneath the video for some of the things you've been talking about. So thanks very much, Sarah.
Thanks.